Hello and welcome to Workers Comp Unwrapped, the podcast that simplifies workers' compensation for physicians. I'm your host, Max, here to give you clear, actionable insights to navigate the medical legal side of workers' comp. So let's get started.
Welcome to Season 2, Episode 24 of Workers Comp Unwrapped with Max and Aisha, who has 15 years of experience in the workers' comp industry. Today we are talking about what happens after maximum medical improvement, MMI, which is an overview of what MMI means for providers, injured workers, and employers, and the implications for ongoing treatment and billing. Welcome back. You know, it's a funny thing, this MMI. Doctors dust off their hands thinking their job's done. Insurers hear kitching time to shut down the payment tap. And providers, they're left staring at the books, wondering if those outstanding claims are ever going to see the light of day. It's like a financial high-wire act, right? And MMI is the moment you realize the net might have been quietly removed. You've seen this play out countless times. Is MMI really the finish line providers hope for, or is it more like the start of a whole new set of headaches?
Oh, more headaches, absolutely.
Yeah.
If a provider thinks reaching maximum medical improvement means they can finally exhale and, relax on the billing front, they're operating under a dangerous illusion. It's definitely not the time to relax. It's arguably the most critical time to be hypervigilant about their financial interests.
All right, let's cut through the jargon then. In California workers' comp, what exactly triggers this MMI moment, and why does it suddenly make everything feel so, precarious for providers?
Okay, so legally speaking, MMI, or maximum medical improvement, it's defined by California Labor Code sections 40601 and 4062. Think of it as the point where the injured worker's medical condition has stabilized. This means that further curative medical treatment isn't expected to bring about any significant improvement.
Curative.
Yes, curative. Now, the crucial detail that often gets overlooked is this. MMI does not mean that all medical care just stops.
Right.
Instead, the focus shifts to what's called palliative or maintenance care treatment, aimed at managing symptoms and maintaining the current condition. It's often referred to as future medical care.
So if we boil it down, MMI is when the doctor essentially says, okay, this is as good as it's probably going to get. And for the insurer, that probably sounds like, great, time to scale back the spending. Now, what are the absolute must-know legal aspects that providers need to be laser-focused on once MMI is declared?
Well, there are several critical legal obligations and shifts. First, the primary treating physician, the PTP, has to issue a comprehensive final report once MMI is reached.
Comprehensive meaning?
Meaning it isn't just a quick note. It needs to detail the worker's current condition, any permanent limitations on what they can do at work, what future medical care they're likely to need, and importantly, whether they have any permanent disability from the injury. This report is basically the foundation for how the claims administrator will figure out any permanent disability benefits and start talking settlement.
Okay.
But here's a real kicker for providers. After MMI, California Code of Regulations Section 9792.6.1 mandates that every single medical service requires prospective authorization through utilization review, or UR.
Every single one, like no exceptions?
No exceptions. We're talking every prescription refill, every physical therapy session, everything needs that UR approval first.
Wow. Okay, so the red tape gets even thicker post-MMI. Let's dig into the practical realities for providers then. How does this shift to MMI actually change their day-to-day experience with billing and, getting paid?
Oh, the landscape shifts dramatically. For one, billing becomes a bit of a minefield.
Uh-oh.
Insurers will be intensely scrutinizing any services billed around or after that MMI date. They'll be asking tough questions about medical necessity and, crucially, whether proper authorization was in place beforehand. This just means a higher likelihood of payment challenges and, frankly, denials.
Okay.
Secondly, getting approval for that future medical care we talked about. It becomes much harder. Remember, pre-approval via UR is mandatory for everything post-MMI. If a provider doesn't submit a request for authorization and RFA before providing that care, well, they can pretty much count on not getting paid for it.
Yikes.
And finally, perhaps the most financially perilous aspect. If there are outstanding balances for treatment provided before MMI, the provider absolutely must file a medical lien before settlement negotiations even begin. Miss this crucial window, and they risk being completely left out when the case closes. Gone.
And I'm guessing the insurance companies aren't exactly sending out friendly reminders saying, hey, don't forget to file your lien.
Not a chance, no. The responsibility falls squarely on the provider to be aware of the MMI declaration and to act swiftly to protect their financial interests by filing those liens. It's a proactive situation, definitely not reactive.
It really sounds like the system puts the burden squarely on the providers to navigate this complex post-MMI terrain. Do we have any data that shows just how significant this issue is for them financially?
We do, absolutely. The California Division of Workers' Compensation, the DWC, has data indicating that over 40%, think about that, over 40% of all disputed medical payments arise from services provided after an injured worker reaches MMI.
40%.
Yeah. And the two main culprits. Either the provider didn't get the necessary utilization review approvals for that post-MMI care, or they failed to file a lien to secure payment for services they provided before MMI. It's a huge chunk of potentially lost revenue if providers aren't, on their toes.
So it's clearly not just about providers then. What's the ripple effect of MMI on the injured workers themselves? And what about the employers who are ultimately fitting the bill?
Right, good question. For the injured worker, reaching MMI often signals the start of assessing any permanent disability they might have. If there's disagreement on the extent of this disability, maybe between their doctor and the insurance company's view, they might need to see a qualified medical evaluator, a QME, for an independent assessment.
Okay.
Then come the settlement options. They might agree to what's called a stipulation with request for award. This basically settles the case, but allows for future medical care related to the injury to remain open.
So they can still get treatment covered later.
Exactly. Or they might opt for a compromise and release, a C&R. That's typically a lump sum payment that closes out all aspects of the claim, including any future medical needs related to that injury.
All done.
All done. Now for employers, MMI is generally seen as the winding down of an active claim. This is significant because the costs tied to workers' comp claims can influence their experience modification rate, or XMOD.
Their insurance rate, basically.
Precisely. A higher XMOD can translate directly to higher insurance premiums down the line. So MMI is a key marker that has real financial implications for employers in terms of their future insurance costs.
So for providers listening, it really boils down to this. MMI is kind of the drop-dead date for making sure your financial ducks are in a row, or you risk being left out in the cold when the claim is resolved.
That sums it up perfectly. It's a critical financial checkpoint that demands immediate and really informed action.
Okay, so what's the survival guide? What concrete steps should providers be taking to avoid those financial pitfalls once MMI hits?
Right, a survival guide. There are several essential practices. First, providers absolutely need to conduct a thorough audit of all treatment dates, especially for any ongoing care that stretches around or goes beyond the declared MMI date. They must double-check, triple-check that they have the necessary UR approvals in place for all of that care.
Audit and verify. Got it.
Second, and this is, well, it's non-negotiable, if there are any outstanding payments for services provided before MMI, they must file their medical liens immediately. That's per California Labor Code, Section 4903. Timely filing is absolutely crucial to secure their right to reimbursement before any settlement happens.
Don't wait.
Don't wait. Third, providers should proactively monitor the settlement negotiations in their patients' cases. Don't just sit back and wait for a phone call that might never come. Reach out to the applicant attorneys. Stay informed about the progress.
Be proactive.
Exactly. And finally, consider the value of engaging a specialized lien management service. A company like, say, MLM can provide crucial support. They can track MMI declarations, make sure UR compliance is handled for post-MMI treatment, manage the lien filings promptly, and importantly, aggressively negotiate those lien payments to maximize the provider's recovery. They do the heavy lifting.
So the recurring theme here seems to be that providers just can't afford to be passive, can they? They need to take the reins and be actively managing their claims, especially once MMI is even mentioned.
Absolutely. Passive equals potentially unpaid.
Okay. Now let's tackle some of the burning questions providers often have about MMI. I bet there's a lot of confusion out there.
Well, for sure. Sounds good. Let's clear some of that up.
First one. Does MMI mean the patient is completely done? Like, no more medical treatment, period?
No, that's a really common misunderstanding. While MMI indicates that further curative treatment isn't expected to significantly improve the patient's condition.
The getting better part.
Right, the getting better part is likely over, but they may still require ongoing medical care. This care, however, is typically palliative or maintenance-focused. It's aimed at managing symptoms, maybe managing pain, rather than actively treating the injury itself. The critical shift post-MMI, though, is that every single medical service, even these symptom-managing treatments, now falls under those strict utilization review requirements. Everything needs pre-authorization.
Got it. Okay, here's a scenario I'm sure many providers face. They provided care after what they maybe thought was MMI, but they didn't get the UR sorted out beforehand. Can they just go back and get a retroactive RFA, fix it later?
Unfortunately, getting retroactive authorization for post-MI care is extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Extremely. Insurers almost always push back hard on those requests.
Really?
Yes, the whole system is really designed for pre-authorization. So the takeaway is crystal clear. Always, always secure your UR approval before providing any treatment once MMI has been declared. Trying to fix it after the fact is, well, it's a long shot at that. Don't count on it.
Okay, practical advice there. Next question. If a provider has outstanding bills when a patient reaches MMI, how quickly should they file that lien? Is there any wiggle room, maybe a grace period?
No wiggle room. Zero. The answer is immediately.
Immediate.
As soon as you're aware that MMI has been reached and there are outstanding balances for prior treatment, that lien should be filed. Pronto. Waiting just increases the risk, dramatically increases the risk of the case settling without your lien being addressed, and that makes it so much harder to recover those funds later.
Right, the leverage is gone. Okay, what if the worst happens? A case actually settles and the provider realizes their lien, maybe it was filed properly, maybe not, but it was somehow overlooked in the settlement. What can they do then? Are they just out of luck?
Well, it's a really challenging situation. It's not necessarily game over, but it's tough. There are avenues for recourse, like appealing to the Workers' Compensation Appeals Board, the WCAB, but honestly, it becomes a much more complex and often expensive process after the fact, after the settlement's done. Your leverage in getting paid is significantly diminished once that case is officially settled. This just really underscores the importance of proactive lien filing and, just as importantly, diligent monitoring of the case to make sure your lien is actually considered during the settlement negotiations, not ignored or dealt with as an afterthought.
Prevention is key, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Prevention is much easier than cure here.
Last question in this segment. How does a lien management service, like MLM you mentioned, specifically help providers get paid after MMI? What are the nuts and bolts of how they operate?
Okay, so a service like MLM offers really end-to-end support. They start by proactively tracking when patients in a provider's practice actually reach MMI. They have systems for this.
So they flag it early.
They flag it early. This triggers a process where they then ensure that all post-MMI treatments have the necessary UR approvals lined up. They manage that RFA process. Then they handle the entire lien and filing process, making sure everything is filed correctly, on time, to fully protect the provider's right to payment. But it doesn't just stop there. MLM actively engages with the insurance adjusters and the applicant attorneys. They negotiate those liens on behalf of the provider, aiming to maximize the chances of full recovery. Essentially, they act as a dedicated advocate, a specialist team, to navigate all the complex administrative and legal hurdles of post-MMI billing and getting those liens resolved.
Okay, that makes sense. So the bottom line here really seems to be that while MMI signifies a certain level of medical stability for the patient, for providers who aren't prepared and proactive, it can very quickly turn into a financial crisis.
That's exactly right, a potential disaster zone if you're not careful.
So what's your ultimate piece of advice, maybe the golden rule, for providers to safeguard their financial health once a patient reaches maximum medical improvement?
My absolute golden rule is this. Document everything meticulously. Get your utilization review authorizations locked down before providing any post-MMI care, and file your lands for any outstanding balances immediately. Time is truly of the essence, and look, if you find yourself getting lost in the weeds in all the complexities, don't hesitate. Partner with a reputable lien management service like MLM to handle the heavy lifting for you.
Couldn't agree more. That seems like solid, essential advice. Thank you for unraveling this critical and often stressful aspect of workers' compensation for us. And thank you all for tuning in. Remember, MMI might not be the end of the road for the patient's treatment, but as we've heard, it can certainly be the end of the line for your payment if you're not paying.
Thank you for
attention.
listening
My
to
pleasure.
Workers
Great
Comp
talking about it.
Unwrapped.
Until our
If
next
you found
deep
value
dive,
in today's
outro
episode,
music
share it
fades
with
in.
your fellow medical providers and healthcare specialists. For more information, contact us at lena.klein@medicallienmgt.com or visit our website, medicallienmgt.com.